No, I think I've actually got the beginnings of, what I'm calling a boundary of intention or a boundary of ethical consent here. Um, what I what I'm discovering is like it's not so much that I want to be, boring politically in the middle of the road. There's a tension there because I've always sort of tended toward, like politically extremist positions because I was one of these kids that like I didn't have anything to lose. Or maybe I was trained in like just one political direction at a given time. Or maybe it was the fact that I perceived my own family as being kind of extremist on the other side from where I was finding the best training and support in my own life. Okay, so like if my parents and grandparents started out on the left, I'm more likely to gravitate toward the right when I get hurt by my parents. Okay, and the thing is I've always kind of taken the position that God help the ignorant sinner, but one of the things that really gets to me is that take this whole issue of like boundaries of sexual consent and whether there is or is not such a thing as the so-called rape culture. Okay, I've actually gotten dipoles on both sides already. Um, and like what I'm sneaking up on, folks, is I really want a tradition back. The way I define family values. Okay, the way I define family values is you have to be able to, first of all, you have to be able to raise a generation of parents, let alone a generation of kids, who, for example, aren't learning to be afraid of the mouse. Okay, and basically, I made a symbolic match just recently that like Walt Disney is the mouse that roared. And here's the thing is there is a particular blend of schools of thought that is like all across Christendom. I don't know where it came from, but like most of the people that are so busy labeling each other as heretics are coming out of this specific definition of what I call an apocalypse fever technology, or apocalypse fever terminology or school of thought. Okay, for me, okay, before I learned to study it out, for me, the apocalypse fever began in about 1972, and let's just say that there was a reason why I got really annoyed that it hadn't died out by at least 2000, let alone 2014. And see, politically, it still is not dead, folks. That's the problem. Is, well, okay, maybe we've got this new technology that is capable of like containing the impulses of any given cultural whack job. Okay, the problem is you go further toward a 1984 totalitarian state, further away from thou shalt think for thyself, which is like um, the only tension I know how to deal with right now. See, I do my very best, ladies and gentlemen, to deal with the tensions I'm given on the day that I actually run into them now. So yeah, I'm experiencing a time compression, And like there's this one very particular, very sensitive point of contention that like I need in my personal matrix, because I want to find out if the principles that I want to teach to adults, okay, can actually be ported over into the teaching of children. And the moment you say something like that, okay, the moment you say something like that, when I first joined the Dark Tower, the concern all over the place, and this is like out to a level of international law, is, you know, don't mention the children. You know, for gosh sake, don't mention the children, because what do you get from the dark side of the net from them? It's basically, you know, well, first of all, you have what I call white lighters trying to prove that, like, you know, Disney, Pixar is being used by dark side or crime lords within the porn industry, so on and so forth. You know, misappropriated hashtags, let's put it that way. Okay, and even assuming there are better controls over that than there used to be like 10, 15 years ago, even assuming there are better controls about that, I'm not denying that child sexual abuse is this huge problem. Okay, I guess the variable I'm trying to work out is if we can't get the full out approximation of an ethical consent boundary for adults to work across all our different sociological models, then how in the scaring hell into me cosmos are we going to ever get to the point where, you know, there is such a thing as teaching our children again what we wish to teach them about our traditions? Okay, I mean, one of the interesting models I just ran into, you know, few moments ago was this, you know, this feminist talking about rape culture, and she claimed to have discovered that, you know, the language of truly ethical consent begins with a negativistic boundary. In other words, with the, you know, if you were to write it into the deep structures of the net, the first thing you need to guarantee for anything is not the ability to say yes, but the ability to say no. Okay, and while I agree with that, okay, there is also a myth that I want to be careful in addressing, because, you know, while I do not want to give the whole game away to the people I consider in this equation to be truly evil, in other words, the people who force the children, okay, not talking about how they force the children, but the people who force the children. And there are, you know, there are massive problems for me. I mean, just a question of defining the box. There's a massive problem for me with, like, the old industrial age doctrine that says that effectively the reason a child is because they're, you know, physically, socially, developmentally, quote, quote, unable to consent to anything. And then you get things like, well, we have all sorts of gifted and talented children across the planet. We've got, you know, 13-year-olds with the capacity that if you let them run for long enough, they don't have to wait the extra 5 years to put together an internet business. That's just, you know, I mean, I saw that in my own generation, folks. I saw that in my own generation. What I'm saying is, we have the capacity, you know, we have the technology to make him better, stronger, faster. No, that's not where I'm going. That's not where I'm going, okay? That's not where I'm going. But what I am saying is we have the capacity to, like, if we're going to eliminate the, the old style 20th century, the old earth notions of what, racism, sexism, and for that matter, ageism consisted of. Okay? For example, why is it never correct to assume that that basically it's only the homosexuals who are not forcing their children into their tradition? Okay? See, that's what I'm coming to believe about the nature of evil, is basically Satan wins any time he can get a polarity set up to where there's conflict on both sides and there's bullshit on both sides. And the thing is, there's a doctrine, not necessarily called the third side, but there are like tri-valued logics. Okay, without being a philosopher, without being a mathematician, there are tri-valued logics out there that basically assume that whatever the truth is, it's eventually going to show up on the third side of the question. Okay. And so, like, the ethical boundary of consent, if you're going to build, if you're going to build consent into, like, any survey at all, here's the hat trick that Facebook could do for, like, any survey at all. See, it's not so much that Facebook, misuses the information they get from their like buttons. Okay, that's not the extent of the problem. The extent of the problem is that, every time Facebook has actually tried to implement a dislike button, they've gotten, scientifically negative results. They've depressed people by doing that. Okay? Well, true intellectual honesty, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what I'm about, is true intellectual honesty across fields. Okay, don't even get into, the argument being a question of, well, bless God, I'm an atheist, so I don't have to believe in this imaginary boogeyman of yours. Never mind that I'm taking away all the magic from the planet. See, that's the kind of argument I'm learning how to make because I've defined terms by now. Okay? Not even Richard Dawkins is able to sit there and tell me that George Lucas doesn't do freaking magic. Okay? He is a magician. Right? He does not, he does not need a personal deity to get there, nor does he need a boogeyman, but he gave us one of the most interesting boogeymen in recent history. See, so the very first thing, if I'm going to be anything, ladies and gentlemen, is like, let me be the next generation of Christian comedian. And yeah, that's going to be hard. That's going to be a hard sell for some people. That's going to be a hard sell for some people. I was actually raised in the tradition of a very fine gentleman by the name of Mike Warnke. Okay, whose records, I mean, eventually he went to his reward. I'm not even sure. There was some kind of a scandal about, like, whether he had actually been originally a Satanist, as he had claimed as like part of his testimony, okay, or whether he had, for example, stolen comedy routines from like other people, and say Bill Cosby, for example, um, and just what did that mean in terms of ethics of intellectual property. But all I know about the man, ladies and gentlemen, was he was a very fine comedian. He taught me a lot of good theology. When I was growing up, it was impossible not just to find clean comedians, but actually to find Christian comedians. And like they would sort of pop onto the landscape and die an unnatural death after a while. Okay? Now, here's where we get to the absolute nexus of what I'm dealing with in terms of like the boundaries of the box. Okay, let me tell you a story. James Dobson got caught up in a particularly nasty mass media campaign against basically the creators of Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, and let's assume that like he was originally sold the idea by John Hagee. Okay, my problem is that like I'm coming to understand that there are levels and levels and levels I need to go through before I can even begin to judge what I considered at the time to have been a mistaken position of conscience by John Hagee against, say, for example, Anne Rice. Okay, but like in the culture of the 60s and 70s that I grew up in, first of all, you have Star Trek, and Star Trek, bless God, belongs to all those Darwinist idiots over there. No. You know who acknowledged otherwise? I can prove this one. Okay, Dr. Martin Luther King pinged Uhura, Nichelle Nichols, and said, basically she was going to quit the show. He said, but you must not, just morally, you must not do that. Okay, don't you realize who you are? You're the first role model that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of black children all over the world are reacting to. Well, it wasn't all over the world at the time. It was a radical experiment. Okay, but and this is what I mean about the tendency of a certain breed of Christian within Christendom to attack what I call symbolic evil, or merely symbolic evil. Okay? Because the dragon's strategy is very simple, folks. He wants so many of us trapped at thinking we can decode the symbolic layers that are like trapped, the subliminal messages, if you like, that are surrounding us in like all levels of society. Television commercials, the whole Christian rock versus Christian metal versus, how dare you listen to anything secular at all. That whole tension, that tension of meaning just has to be freaking eliminated. Okay? Boom! I get a very bad feeling about this. Bye-bye! Okay? That's what George Lucas reduced our equation to. Okay? And it's very, very simple for children to understand. But then you get into the idea that there's actually, And you're beginning to understand my style now, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you're beginning to understand that, like, I have this very specific voice of the serpent, voice of the devil, voice of true darkness, if you will. Okay, because, like, don't even get into, I've projected, I've projected real powers of darkness and real channeling in other parts of my experience too. Okay, not saying I wasn't a Christian at the time, just a very ignorant one. Okay, see, because that's the argument that's made all over Christendom that really, really annoys me. If you want to be a member of the Spanish Inquisition, the first position you go to is, such and such a person. And remember, it's always the person over there. Okay, that's Lee's hypothesis. It's always the dude that's over there. Okay, and they are being a freaking non-Christian, and I can no, they're being a bad one. Okay, they're being a bad Christian based on bad training from like maybe a bad tradition or bad school of thought that they bought into. But at least let's come into an agreement to say, okay, just because I don't agree with, your denominational position does not mean that I will sit here and call you a damned atheist, or you're this particular breed of Catholic or that particular breed of Protestant, and therefore, I have proofs to suggest that, my school of thought has always taught that you people over here are going to hell. Okay? Finite universe. Finite universe. You know what C.S. Lewis said about hell? C.S. Lewis basically said that hell was this infinitely shrinking space. Okay? Picture, the usual conception of like a black hole, only worse. Okay? I mean, look it up. We're back to the primary thesis proof of my entire project, folks. Look it up. Great Divorce. That's the symbolic structure. That's the symbolic proof for the entire Veritasia project. So the idea that Lewis had, not only did he give us a brilliant 20th century approximation of hell, okay, but the idea that Lewis had was that the devils were interested in, like, literally eating egos such that they could expand their own ego space at the expense of another critter's. Okay? So basically, this is why Screwtape gets to eat wormwood at the end of... Okay, I've probably spoiled that for some people. Still brilliant, brilliant, brilliant book. Anyway, Lewis's version of heaven and hell was that, like, heaven turned out to be a place so vast that while Lewis's protagonist character his protagonist projection had been in hell, this infinitely spaced, empty, ratty old town was the original metaphor. Okay, and while he had been in this supposedly infinite space where people are constantly moving further and further away from each other, okay, here's the problem, is that space was contained in just a teensy tiny little crack. Okay. And, I mean, either you're going to read the book eventually anyway and get to the spoilers, or not. But how am I going to expand the argument if I can't even expand the bounds of your conceptual universe? Even if I have to quote unquote spoil your fun, you've made the entire project boring for me now, Fox. No. Just bullshit. Okay, just flat out bullshit. If you're not going to read Screwtape, if you're not going to read Tolkien, if you're not going to read this book or that book or whatever, fine. I'll go review another book for you, that's all. Okay? Because, sooner or later we are going to reach the same point. That's the whole point about intellectual territory. Okay? Intellectual territory is a little different from intellectual property. Okay? But, yeah, that would be a wonderful nexus to cover in like the next video. Maybe the difference between what I'm calling a territorial versus a corporate nation state, or the stuff I want to build has much more of the flavor of what I call an internet republic. Okay, an internet republic is basically literally a tribe, not necessarily confined to a specific territory, but having its own binding law, structured for it within the structure of cyberspace. Imagine what could happen, for example. This is just one little projection I've been working on. And at this point, I don't care whether the Google engineers grab it or not. I'm not looking for some white lighter to come rescue me at this point. But imagine, for example, has anybody done a hard science longitudinal study on voice print locks? Because what if the firewall structure of the literally the next generation of the internet could be, first of all, you need basically voice-driven locks on basically all of your file structure. That's as close to quantum as we can get, as far as I understand the state of the technology. That's as close to quantum as we can get right now. We've cracked the problem. I called Social Security again this morning, had a very nice chat with a very friendly AI. Okay, I don't mind when they're not doing freaking interruption marketing, you see. Okay, but I had this very nice chat with this very friendly, intelligent AI, and because I had called at like the right time in the morning, I got in right away and got the one particular piece of information that I needed right away. Okay? Whereas if I had called, and I did call about 3-4 earlier, 3-4 o'clock that previous afternoon, and I was put on basically a waiting line where it's like, oh yeah, we do service about 50 million people, so please be patient. And the thing is, they want you to get flabbergasted by that number. But the fact is, they can do it. They can do it at all. Okay, 50 million people getting monthly checks from Uncle Sugar. Okay, that's how big the box is, folks. But it doesn't have to be that big. There are solutions. Veritasia is one such solution. Okay, I may not have to, heaven defend me, I may be able to compress the whole Empower Network process, not because I'm competing with them, but just because I grok what's going on. Okay? And by that time I'll have my own teaching style there won't be any question of competition, because like everybody who's all in with the Empower Network will understand at least the significance of like what it means to be a full out Empower Network wizard. Okay, and attention, Lawrence Tam, this is what I want to do for our company when I get there. Again, don't touch me now. Okay, I'm on the One Ring quest. Okay, and basically, yeah, the stupid mistake. See, even the stupid mistakes are going to catch up to you sooner or later. But that doesn't always necessarily need to be bad news. Like one of the best examples was I was finally able to get hold of Lawrence on Facebook, and I asked him. I said, "Can I, basically, can I stack my own inner circle with Christians only because of the project I want to do?" He said, "Look, your internals are yours. Okay, you can do with." You can do with your own groups what you please. Just don't touch the Empower Network trade name when you do that. And okay, then Bishop McElroy basically said the same thing. Okay, I won't even get into the implications of that because people will think I'm crossing the line already, and that's the thing. There are places where I have to prove stuff, and there's places where I can just leave it alone and do my own job. And here's what I mean by a white lighter conspiracy, folks. What if everybody on the planet really was trying to do their own job? Okay, that's why I have a problem with the postulate of a darknet conspiracy. The reason I have to leave it in the paradigm is because I'm respecting King Solomon when he talked about the tendency of governments to corrupt themselves. Okay, or in secular terms, the doctrine that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Okay, that's the thing. Basically, how can you balance the budget when, for example, you still have a radical intelligence level need for what are known as black projects, and you probably always will. Okay, as long as we're within time. But yeah, there is hope, folks. Come join me in the year 2525 if you really want to find out, what a tradition of Christian speculative fiction is supposed to look like. Because it's not that we'll have it in front of us, it's that we'll make it. That's the whole point. Okay, so this is the probably the second report for day 2 of Project Terra 2014. And I am King Caspian of Veritasia signing out.